Aloha. I'm going to read two documents. The first one is the 1871 treaty, a clip it, between the Hawaiian Kingdom and the Japanese Empire. However, before I read that, I just want to contextualize Japan's situation so you understand, because we're all familiar with the kingdom's history. Well, 3 years before this treaty was signed in 1871, in 1868, the Japanese bakufu, or military government, had collapsed after 200 years. So the country was in flux at that time. One of the things that brought it about, besides internal things, was that U.S. Commodore Perry had come into Japan and in 1853 and forced Japan to sign these unequal treaties. After that happened in 1854, the other Western countries came in and forced Japan to sign other unequal treaties. So from that point on, Japan was just very worried about becoming recognized as a full sovereign nation and to revise these treaties. In 1871, when it signed the treaty with the Hawaiian Kingdom, it was under Kamehameha V. In this treaty, the kingdom was in the power seat as it received this thing called extraterritoriality, which means Hawaiian subjects have immunity, do not have to listen to the laws. But with the Japanese Empire, it didn't have that same right. So I want to read that part because it adds in later on. In Article 4, it says, "It is hereby stipulated that the Hawaiian government and its subjects, upon like terms and conditions, will be allowed free and unequal participation in all privileges, immunities, and advantages that it may have been or may hereafter be granted by His Majesty the Tenno of Japan to the government or citizens or subjects of any other nation." So the kingdom is saying, they want the same rights as all the other ones, which would be the UK, France, Russia that has it with Japan. Then in Article 5, because one of the reasons why the kingdom wanted a treaty with Japan is because the sugar planters wanted laborers. So in Article 5, it says the Japanese government will place no restrictions whatever upon the employment of the Hawaiian subjects of the Japanese in any lawful capacity. So after the signing of the treaties, obviously some other incidents had happened where the American who was appointed by the kingdom to do this negotiation, they first had it with the government that was dying, and I think a couple days before the first immigrants were to come to Japan, the whole government collapsed. The American, his name was Van Reed, decided to take them anyway, and so this caused a rift, but then they signed the treaty. But after that, Japan didn't send any more immigrants. And what they did is they started to see what was happening in Asia and the Pacific, and they had this motto called Fukoku Kyohei, which means enrich the nation, strengthen the military, because they felt that they had to do this in order not to become overtaken by the West. And so what they did is they had something sort of like Mahele, where they privatized the lands. They knew they had to get the peasants off the lands to come into a bureaucracy, namely the military, and to work in the government offices. Before, everyone was self-sufficient and they remained in their areas. So they did compulsory education so that they start to think of Japan in a more unified way. They created land taxes where they had to pay not in harvest, but in money, and they didn't have money. And so they lost a lot of land, and also they had to become drafted in the military. So when Kalakaua comes in 1881 on his world tour, he offers them that he would take away the extraterritoriality clause in the treaty. So the Japanese were very happy because this is the first recognition of them as an equal nation state with another country. Of course, it didn't happen because the Japanese were too afraid, because they wanted to redo their treaties via the United States. But what this means to me that's significant is that Kalakaua was willing to go against all the Western treaty powers. So it fits in because it's 2 years before what Lawrence just read with the protest. So Kalakaua was already thinking in that way. Then the next documents I want to read is actually during the Republic, is in the 1897 telegrams. And this is really between the two Japanese workers. One in Washington, D.C., he sends this telegram to the foreign minister in Tokyo, and then between the U.S. Secretary of State to the consulate here in Hawaii. You know, when they changed over to the Meiji period after 1868, they didn't write a constitution till 1889. So that's a long time, and all these different things had happened. By the time the overthrow did occur, Hawaii was pretty much a household word in most Japanese families. They knew where Hawaii was. But the Japanese elites, they were also working on this other program called peaceful expansion. What it meant is that they were saying this is war without warfare. So they wanted to go out as part of their ideology was through their mythology, they're saying the role of Japan is to go out and conquer the whole world, right? So part of their thing was through, besides economic trade, was through their immigrants, people immigrating away. Japan called them doho, which was compatriots. So they did not care if those who left, if they became American citizens or Russian citizens, because they went all over the world, they were still considered part of the Japanese Empire. So thus when the overthrow happened, they were concerned. They sent a warship to Hawaii, but they didn't do anything because Japan was still in a weak position. A year later, they have a war with China, and they win. So it bolsters their self-image in the world. And then when McKinley gets into office, and then they kind of sign a treaty, I mean, like supposedly the annexation treaty, but it never happens. As we all know, it went through a joint, what was it called? Yeah. Joint, what was it? Resolution, yes, sorry you guys. Japan sent a protest when they first signed it, and they protested to the United States over this, and it wasn't over that the United States was going to take over Hawaii. They were upset because they felt that the Republic had owed them all this money. It was going to stop their trade, because they knew America was a very racist country, and they were afraid for their own people. They also didn't like the Republic, too, because for those very same reasons. So I'm going to read a telegram from the Japanese minister in Washington, D.C., Toru Hoshi, to his foreign minister in Tokyo, Shigenobu Okuma. And this is on June 17th, and this is what he's saying. I submit my plan, which I believe to be the only possible means of frustrating the scheme of the Hawaiian annexation, that is, our occupation of the island, by dispatching without any delay some powerful ships under the name of reprisal, taking advantage of the present relations between Japan and Hawaii, which were very tense because the Republic had denied 3 boatloads of immigrants, and then they also decided to tax sake. So the Japanese government, thinking, you know, because they're trying to work to become equal with everybody else, they took this as an offense. Meanwhile, the Republic leaders, they wanted to create some kind of incident because they wanted the United States to annex Hawaii. They felt this would push the United States to do it. But 2 days later, the Japanese minister in Washington, D.C. tells the United States secretary, oh no, they have no plans to take over, occupy Hawaii, even though behind the scenes they are. The second telegram I want to read is a month later, the Secretary of State Sherman does write to Sewell, who's in Hawaii, to be careful to watch the Japanese. So to me, what's important is even though they're saying one thing on the surface, behind, the 2 countries are already planning war. He says, quote, watch the situation carefully. If the Japanese should openly resort to force, such as military occupation or seizure of public property, you will confer with local authorities and the admiral, land suitable force, and announce provisional assumptions of protectorate by the United States over Hawaii pending the consummation of annexation treaty, declaring at the same time all rights established in favor of their parties will be respected. Some scholars have said that this was the first incident in which Japan and the United States begin to prepare for war, which we know culminates in World War II.